الكرام
Dear audience, I would like to welcome you back at the session 2 of Al Jazeera 17th Forum, which under the title of the transformations in the regional landscape. At the beginning, please allow me to welcome our panelists into today's panel, Mr. Khalid Jaber, Executive Director of the Middle East Council for Global Affairs in Qatar, Alam Saleh, Senior Lecturer in Iranian Studies at the Center for Arab and Islamic Studies, Australian National University, Mr. Marwan Qablan, Director of Political Studies at the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies, and Mr. Seljuk Aydin, Assistant Professor at Bogazici University in Turkey. I would like to welcome you all. When we talk about transformations in the regional landscape, it's a quite wide concept imposed by the series of events, of course, and of course it brought many questions that were asked in other sessions that we were following up the discussion, which was facilitated by my colleague Zainuddin Abdin under the title of Gaza. And from Gaza, maybe it would be Gaza, it will be the starting points for many questions about the transformations that our region has witnessed and the world as well, and these transformations that was witnessed and observed by everybody. Allow me to ask a few questions. How the events of the 7th of October and the war in Gaza have changed the powers in the region. How is Turkey is managing its many regional dossiers, and as the region is moving into more rapprochement after, of course, taking the backdrop of the Israeli threat. And there are many questions, of course, for our audience that will be discussed. So we start with the reading of the scene, with more analysis. We read the indications, and I was stuck to start with Mr. Marwan Qablan. So greetings to everybody, and I would like to thank Al Jazeera Center for Studies for its invitation to participate in this forum. I would like to start by saying that the Al-Aqsa flood and the war in Gaza was one of the critical, probably, moments in the region, and it's maybe not less important, in my personal opinion, on other critical moments that the region has witnessed in the last century. We witnessed that it's not as important, it's not less important as the invasion of Iraq or the September 11 events, because it reshaped the region, similar to the way that what happened after the September attacks and the invasion of Iraq. So today, the region, I think of it as having two dynamics when it comes to repositioning itself. The first one is the international one, because the region was always divided based on the international dynamics. Of course, during the Cold War, there was what is the moderate Arab monarchies, and of course we have the revolutionary systems, the republics, and the world was divided between the Soviet Union and the United States, and that division continued until the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. The region, with the collapse of the Soviet Union and, of course, the rise of the United States as a monopole, the region followed that trend, because there was a containment of the powers, of the radical powers described by the West as Iraq and Iran, based on the dual containment at the beginning of the 90s during the Clinton's administration, and, of course, the rise of the Saudi-Egyptian axis from 1991 and until 2001. Until then, the invasion of Iraq, and that shifted, and also the United States, of course, with the occupation of Iraq, it became a member of many countries in the region, Syria, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, by occupying or invading Iraq. So Of course, that witnessed also a rise of Iran. Until 2023, Iran has moved into a leader of the annex of resistance and an active factor in the region. And we've witnessed the transformations on at other level, which I call as the regional level. We've talked about the international level transformation, and the region would follow this bipolar system. And then we moved into one camp that is dominating the Arab region, and we have the occupation of the invasion of Iraq, or what Condoleezza Rice has described, that two axes, and the Arab Spring, of course. So we moved from three camps during the Arab Springs. We have three poles. We have the one that is led by Iran, and the axis that led by Iran, and the other one is related to Qatar and Turkey, and the third one is related to UAE, Saudi Arabia. And it was probably crystallized more what happened in 2013, what we reached to Al-Aqsa flood, and we've witnessed a big transformation in that period, in a way that once again there were three camps, if I can say it, or three coalitions or alliances. Of course, the Iranian probably influence retreated, and we have to read the reality in a good way. If we keep probably read things the way we like it, because we have a problem. We have a problem in the Arab region. We have this aspect of wishful thinking, what we wish for, and we have the reality, and we have to read it the way it is. There has been a retreat, a big retreat in the Iranian influence, and of course the resistance movement in Lebanon, and of course in the war in Houthis in Yemen, and what also the fall of Al-Assad regime in Syria. So after the Al-Aqsa flood, the retreat of the Iranian influence, and the rise of Israel as a power that wants to reshape the region. Whether Israel is successful or not, we will not discuss that, but this is the Israeli intention and the Israeli wish, supported by the United States. Of course, what I have noticed due to the weakness of Iran and the rise of Israel, that once again these coalitions were mixed up. So we would see now, after the Israeli aggression on Qatar, we witnessed a new alignment in the region. For example, we've seen a Saudi-Pakistani alliance, potential Turkey might join it. Egypt is still thinking about it, trying to balance things out. And also there is another alliance that we witnessed weeks ago, when by signing the agreement of cooperation, strategic defense between UAE and India. Israel is an ally to India, and of course there is a strong relationships with Israel, and I have to mention a point when it comes to the relation with Iran is critical in my opinion, because if we talk about reformation of the alliances in the region, and maybe there is Pakistani, Saudi, Emirati, maybe the battle on Iran may change the scene completely, because it is open to many interpretation. If the United States is successful in changing the regime and pushing towards bringing or re-establishing a regime that is very allied to Israel, I believe that we will be witnessing a critical change. And this is one of the ramifications of Al-Aqsa flood. We know very well that in Iran, in its defense strategy has changed. It's used the advanced defense strategy to deter Israel by from attacking it through regional allies, but the allies are not useful for Iran. Iran is standing on its own, so there is an insistence on the Iranian missiles, because this is its last final defense cards. It has nothing but the ballistic missiles that. If Israel is capable of removing this part, so if they are successful in changing Iran is, if Israel is successful in changing that, and there is another camp, and there is another bloc is forming, Saudi, Pakistan, Turkey, and maybe Egypt will be joining that. So I look into the region in this way. The alliances have changed, and all that happened because as a result of the Al-Aqsa flood. Changes to Iran are suggesting many interpretations, of course, with its relations with the negotiations that's happening in Muscat, Oman, between the Iranians and the Americans. Mr. Marwan, you gave us an idea about the map of transformations in the near future, and you said that it is completely different to what happened. Mr. Khalid Al-Jaber, what do you think about the regional changes now, taking into consideration with the fast momentum of things? So thank you so much to Al Jazeera for this invitation. Maybe I probably participated in many conferences in the last few months, whether it was in Tunisia or Morocco or Saudi Arabia, and in the Gulf, and Bahrain, and Jordan, and 2 weeks ago. In fact, I've noticed when I talk about the analysis, the political analysis, this pessimistic point of view is dominant. The dark side. If we assume that problems as a glass of water, we always look into the empty part of that glass. We try to break down the narrative and to think about the ways how it will serve us to deal with the international politics. It's very clear that pessimism is prevailing, and the Arab reality, we are not in a very excellent position. And in the last 5 years, it didn't start with the Arab Spring. It started at many, if we talk about Sykes-Picot and the crises that we witness every 10 years, there are real crises that we are plagued with. And number two, I have noticed that all the themes that are reinstated itself to be discussed. The theme that I have found in most of the conferences that I took part is there is a talk about a new Arab Spring, especially with the Gen Zs, and how can they use the technology now in creating a real difference in the Arab world. Unfortunately, this comes from people who are heavyweighted. Let us forget about what's happened in the last 15 years when the Arab revolutions started. Are we ready? Are we prepared for new revolutions, uprising? If these revolutions happen in a divided world, Arab world that is suffering from crisis, what will happen in the society? Will it be a prosperous one? Will it we live democracy? All the signals suggest something else. We are not talking about historic experiences. Let us talk about the countries that witnessed Arab Spring, even the gray areas, whether there was some kind of freedom of expression or freedom of media. It eroded. To promote this narrative, we need to break it down. If it happens, what we as peoples, as elites, how can we deal with these narratives? There are no narratives that can actually give us a full picture. Number three, I believe that if we focus on talking, and what we finish what Dr. Marwan started, the problems with the Western powers. Of course, we since the establishments of or the independence of the states, we are an alignment of the United States, and with all the challenges that Trump brought, the rejection of international institutions, organizations, of course, the tariffs, the imposition of the tariffs, and of course, of course, we are not the only people who are suffering. Europe, the traditional ally to the United States, they are suffering even more. Asia is suffering, Africa is suffering, Latin America is suffering, Venezuela. The president is in prison now, and talking about the increasing the area of the United States as well. But we as Arabs, as Muslims, how can we come out with, how can we have a safe exit, and how can we come out with real gains, even a few gains? So this is a narrative, this is a talk that hasn't been suggested. This is a discussion that hasn't started. We're still talking about right and left, between black and white, the gray area. What can the Arabs benefit from? This is not for discussion. I would like to refer to the speech of the Canadian Prime Minister. He had a beautiful speech. He said that if you are not sitting at the table, you will be on the table to be prayed on. So what can we as Arabs do? If we look into the other part of the glass, there are big movements. And Dr. Marwan talked about new alliances. I believe the Arab countries, the Gulf countries, of course, with the leadership of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, is imposing new realities, or also relying on the stability of the region, fighting division, and investing in the unity of the states, whether in Somalia and Syria and so all these positive points that we can build on, we should not undermine them or take pre-positions. The other problem, and I feel it is the biggest problem when I believe that when we talk about Iran and Iran, maybe the GCC, and going back into your question, maybe it came up with a threat when when the Iranian Islamic Revolution and 1979 and exporting the revolution, there was a fear for more than 50 years. If we take into consideration the 5 coming years, that was probably the hooligan. What happened that we don't want Iran to go into war. What will happen in Iran? We will all pay a price. Iran is a big country, and we are joined by geography, by religion. For Iran to reach consensus with the United States, this is the ambition of everybody. So the GCC countries, whether it was Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Kuwait, there is a real will for mediations. All the leaks, the New York Times and other media, American media outlet, that pressuring for not to be a military adventure with Iran. And I really heartily wish that for this region to be stable, because the division that the Arab countries have been witnessing, we need to enter a more stable phase and to clear the air and clear the conflicts in what we can with the tools that are available in the political toolbox that we have. So, Mr. Khalid Al-Jaber, you talked about Iran, and it is an issue that has many questions, of course, many concerns, and suggests many scenarios. Mr. Alam Saleh, you are an expert in the Iranian affair, and Mr. Marwan just he talked about a big retreat in the Iranian role after the 7th of October events. How do you evaluate the Iranian position, taking into consideration all the transformations that have happened?
I'll give my talk in English. First of all, good morning, Doha, and thank you, Al Jazeera. The first challenge is to talk about all these complexities in 5 minutes. So welcome to Middle East. There is a saying that whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but that doesn't apply to the Middle East. Whatever happens in the Middle East, it affects the whole entire global economy, politics, and security. And therefore, such complexity is extremely important to look at in a very kind of in-depth analysis, I would call it. And therefore, I have two angles to look at the issue that was going on in the Middle East and what defines particularly Iran's behavior towards such historical changes that the region is witnessing. The 2 centuries of Western dominance and hegemony globally and in the region in particular has always been dominating and defining, shaping and reshaping Middle East security and politics for, again, at least 2 centuries. Peace processes, conflicts, legitimacy, red lines have always been set by the so-called Western-led order. And my argument today will be that this order is challenged. We are moving towards a multipolar world order where other emerging powers are challenging this Western dominance. Challenging the Western dominance doesn't necessarily mean weakening the West. West is there, United States is there, and they are more powerful than ever. However, the gap between the West and the rest is narrowing. There are emerging powers, global emerging powers, that are challenging the Western hegemony when it comes to military power, economic, politics, and security. That means the West is losing its power to impose the values and norms set by the West that we have been witnessing in the past few centuries, or at least for us in the last few decades. Therefore, my second argument is that key historical events have been quite important in accelerating this process. One of them, of course, is the 7th of October and the following the Gaza war. Of course, prior to that, the 11th September. Prior to that, the first war, Iran-Iraq war, and then Kuwait war, and so on. So these key historical events play a very important role in shaping, again, or defining and or redefining, revisiting our understanding of the alliance making in the region and so on. My second argument is that such a transition period, it creates a security gap. It creates political gap, ideological gaps, which we have been witnessing at least in the past 2 decades or so. So the relative decline of American power, and which we may call it the post-American Middle East, does not necessarily mean the absence of United States in the region. United States is there, and it will be there. But it means the centrality rule of the American-led regional order, when and where actors in the Middle East, regional actors, become, or they will get more agency to act independently. This has its own, of course, consequences. In some cases, we may lose kind of a security guarantee that have been taken responsibility by the United States in the past, when we had a unipolar, on the one hand, the so-called the Arab Cold War, Soviet Union in one hand, United States on the other hand. And on the other hand, it shows, it creates a kind of a chaotic atmosphere, which we are witnessing it at the moment. So my argument is that there are gaps, there are vacuums, security vacuum, political vacuum, ideological vacuum, thanks to the 2003 Iraq War, which created a new Middle East for sure, and followed by the so-called Arab Spring, which further deepened such vacuums, okay, or gaps between a kind of a multipolar or multi-layered kind of segment of or section or sectors in the Middle East. And by this I mean social divisions, societal divisions, political divisions, national divisions, regional divisions, which are also informed by the international divisions. The rule of great power politics has always been omnipresent when it comes to the Middle East. Now we see these gaps that kind of is the result or the consequences of the so-called relative decline of United States power in the region, which they have lost, of course, again, they have not lost the military present or economic kind of leverage, but they have lost the normative authority. They have lost the kind of political authority to, or legitimacy actually, to impose and set their own norms and values in the region, again, thanks to what we have been witnessing, unfortunately, in the Gaza war, when the West has showed that it's all about politics, it's all about geopolitics, and the so-called idea of human rights, democracy, rights in general it's nothing but a political tool in order to enhance their political end or strategic geopolitical ends. This atmosphere, this kind of transitional kind of period is what shapes or informs Tehran's policy to resist. My argument is that Tehran's policies in the region is not ideological, despite the fact that they have a rhetoric of religious, sectarian, you name it, nationalist. Yes, of course, these all rhetorics are used by everyone, everywhere, including the Western democracies. It's all about this changing balance of power. And this, again, this power vacuum that is occurring in such a period of time that Tehran requires or actually prescribes itself to act in a way to fill this gap. I will conclude, and I think I talked more than 5 minutes, that what's going on in the Middle East is new. It has not been seen. There are regional actors, powers, and of course, extra-regional powers such as China are attempting to fill this gap. We are actually witnessing the post-American Middle East order, but we don't have any alternative order to introduce. All actors are attempting to feel this in a way they wish, and the recent kind of diplomatic activities that we have seen in the Middle East, which is extremely actually phenomenal. It shows that the Middle East is trying to redefine itself rather than being defined by others. Thank you.
شكرا أستاذ علم. ربما يجمع الجميع حتى اللحظة على أن هناك اختلاف جوهري كبير مدعى ربما للتساؤلات في هذه المرحلة. سأتوقف عند توصيف ذكرت قبل قليل بأن المنطقة تعيش أجواء فوضى أو أجواء فوضوية، وهنا أنتقل إليك سيد سلجوق. إذا كانت الأمور أو الأجواء في المنطقة تشهد فوضى بهذا الشكل، تركيا كيف تدير ملفاتها في هذه المرحلة؟ هنا نتحدث ليس فقط عن تركيا ومحيطها وإقليمها، نتحدث عن تركيا في ملفات مهمة لها، نتحدث عن غزة، عن سوريا، العراق وأيضا السودان.
Thank you for Al Jazeera inviting me, and also I want to highlight the editorial team of Al Jazeera, who are also following the truth and also supporting Palestinian cause. And more than 215 people were military in Palestine, and I am very much, my praise and honor with all these peoples and their families and Al Jazeera family as well. So based on indeed previous speakers who are mentioned about, let's say, the contemporary political developments by Mr. Marwan, which is very much complex to understand. And it is not because of the contemporary developments within the region, at the same time in the global politics as well. And the most significant thing, as Mr. Khalid also highlighted, the conceptualization issue of the current affairs in the Middle East politics, I think, which is the key point, and we can understand the process and how to answer the problem. And also Mr. Alim Saleh mentions the vacuum in the Middle East. So what would be the alternative order? I think which also should be based on the values. And if we question the values, we can understand the problem as well. So when I read the synopsis of this session, and there's writing Arab world, and speakers and previous also session has also highlighted about the Arab world. But I want to also question the Arab world as well, because there's a huge discrepancy among the Arab states in social science, sociology, economy, politics, and most significantly, security. And within this situation, I think we need to question the history, and we should trace it back to late Ottoman period. I can also trace it back to earlier period, but we should also conceptualize the modern era. So what happened during the late Ottoman Empire? So most of the Arab states currently, and also Turkey, was a part of this unity under the Ottoman Empire. When the nationalist ideas and identity politics came to Ottoman Empire, the Arab, Kurds, Turks, even the Lebanese Christians and Druze in Syria were following their nationalistic values under the Ottoman tenet. And there wasn't any policies against the Ottoman unity. Even if we ask the Rashid Reza, Muhammad Abdu, who can conceptualize under the Islamic unity, at the same time, Shakib Arslan from the Druze origin, also Butrus al-Bushi from Lebanese Christian, and many Kurdish leadership, Abdurrahman Bedirhan and Turkish Hamdullah Supi. So all these nationalistic values of different ethnicities were not competing each other, were not conflicting each other. And they were trying to improve, support their national identity under the Ottoman rule. So what we need in the region, I think we need to common sense and common utopia against the current world order conceptualizations. So we can trace this back to post-Ottoman process under the League of Nations ruled, which means also mandate regime in the Middle East by the British and French domination. And then during the Cold War period, nationalism was also the part of the regime during that process, but the main perspective of nationalism during the Cold War against the colonialism. That's, I think, key point. But after the 1990s, we forget all this conceptualization because of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and most of the countries and societies were following Washington Consensus. What was the Washington Consensus? Which was a market-led capitalism and following the certain model from the Western countries. And then Beijing Consensus emerged, which means the state-led capitalism. So among all these concepts, currently we are witnessing new era of the world and also region. Moscow is also highlighting warfare state. After the Ukraine war, most of the countries are following the security-based policies. But I think Tel Aviv is the most significant for the region and which is threat for Turkey and Arab world. What is that? Tel Aviv Consensus is a recolonization process. And what is that? It is indeed same with the 19th century political trajectory for the region. And even United States is following these policies in Greenland, in Venezuela, in different parts of the world. So for Turkey, I think main position of Turkey is against this kind of the recolonization of the region and this value vacuum in the world politics. Why? Because about 15 years ago, Turkey faced these problems and coup d'etat happened. And in Syria, while Turkey is supporting the humanitarian cause in Syria, and which faced huge problems internally, regionally, and externally as well. And Turkey right now is trying to establish new security new security alignment with the Arab world as well. But the question is again same. Is there Arab world? Is there like a unity of the Muslim world? And is there unification of the Turkish and the other regional powers? That's the key problem. But what we have, the most advantage of the region right now is there is a collapse of values in the world politics and the region. And despite all differences, despite all discrepancies and gap in the region, in the Arab world, even in the Turkic world, we can mention because Turkey is supporting Turkey Consul to empower relation with the minor Asian Turkic countries, there are huge differences. But at the same time, all region has commonality. While the collapse of the values, all region has the certain common values which can also establish commonality and common ground, which is indeed very much clear. It is based on the decolonization, local values. At the same time, at the top, we have the common Islamic values. Thank you.
شكرا سيد سلجوق. أعود إليك أستاذ مروان للتعليق ربما على كل ما سمعنا، تحديدا ما قاله السيد سلجوق. الربط التاريخي في الوقت الراهن وفي هذه المرحلة هل هو مفيد طالما أن الاختلاف موجود إذا ما قارنا التحولات اليوم بتحولات السابق؟
لا، أنا برأيي التاريخ دائما مفيد، لأنه اللي ما عنده قدرة أن يفهم يعني التحولات التاريخية اللي جرت في المنطقة، أنا بعتقد أنه صعب يفهم حاضرها وحتى يستشرف في مستقبلها، لأنه أنا بعتقد أنه أمور كثيرة يعني أقصد تاريخيا ينبغي استدعائها أحيانا حتى نستطيع نكون فهم حقيقي لما يجري حاليا. لذلك أنا ربما فاتني في مداخلتي الأولى كمان تاريخيا، أنا أقول بأنه في سمات أساسية اللي هو من التحولات اللي عم تجري بالوضع الإقليمي، وربما هذه تحصل المرة الأولى. يعني عم نلاحظ مع تراجع الأدوار المركزية للدول الكبرى العربية، أقصد
Syria and relatively Egypt, and the relative decline, and here I emphasize relative decline of the US's interest in the region, because the US now is adopting policies of America first and focusing on China. So there are non-Arab regional countries coming in the line of regional power such as India. There is a defense agreement now between UAE and India and between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. So we see non-Arab countries entering into this new balance of power. This started with the Syrian-Iranian alliance since 1979. But now we see non-Arab states, and for the first time, Israel itself is part of the balance of power, meaning there are alliances now with Arab countries, and there is an alliance that is being crystallized currently, Indian, Emirati, and Israeli. On the other side, there is a Saudi, Pakistani, Turkish alliance. So we see the regional balance of power for the first time includes Arab and non-Arab states. And Israel is a very sensitive topic for the Arabs to have any alliance with. So we should point to this, and maybe we can project that historically. Give us examples. Okay, compare what's happening now with eras in the past. The United States is leaving a big vacuum now, or a gap in the region, by allowing those regional countries to fill this gap, because we don't have an Arab body or entity, with all due respect to the Arab states, but we don't have an Arab country that is able to play those roles that were played in the past, historically. So we should pay attention to this political status to understand what's happening. History is important. So what's happening in Iran nowadays is a big battle that is concerning to us as Arabs, because I see that Iran has problems between it and many Arab countries for reasons witnessed in the past for decades, or even historically if we go back. But it's not going to benefit us historically if we go back, because it's more geopolitical than creeds or religion. So what's happening today with Iran is a big problem concerning to the Arabs and the Turks, because if the Iranian regime fell and it was replaced by a system that is near to the United States, meaning the Iranian-Israeli relations go back to the days of the Shah of Iran with the new structure in the region, I call it, this is the lethal quadruple alliance, if you will. If we see a big change in Iran,
هذه ثاني مرة تطرح فيها سيناريو سقوط
so I think
سقوط النظام
she is speaking about the possibility of the fall of the Iranian regime. Is that realistic? Mr. Qablan is saying we should study the worst and the least likely to happen scenarios to understand. How realistic is the fall of the Iranian regime? Maybe because of attacks that are expected or prominent. The scenario of war, can it lead to an overthrow of the regime in Iran? I rule out that the Iranian regime would fall. I speak in Arabic now, spontaneously. He'll speak in English now.
Due to the specific security architecture of Iran's internal kind of domestic security apparatus, it's very unlikely to see the collapse of the regime. No matter how the powerful United States kind of strike might be. And I personally believe that United States actually, they know it, they know that they cannot change the regime, and they are not intending to do so. However, their aim is to weaken Iran. To weaken it, by weakening means to reduce its military capabilities, to destroy its nuclear facilities, to ensure the Israelis' hegemony and dominance in the region as the only regional power in West Asia. And by a specific security architecture inside Iran, I mean, Iran, unlike other countries, has two national armies. It has a national army in one hand, and it has a IRGC, or Revolutionary Guard, on the other hand, and they balance each other. It has 12 different intelligence offices. Revolutionary Guard has its own, the Ministry of Intelligence, the Judiciary Office has its own, the Disciplinary Force has its own, and so many others. And by studying what happened in many Arab worlds, the role of army was very important in toppling their regime or not. And this is not possible inside Iran. Because these powers, these security forces, they balance each other. So there is independently, and they cannot act differently. And that makes it quite difficult to internally kind of change the security apparatus. And we have seen that they have been kind of loyal to the regime in the past different uprising we have witnessed. On the other hand, we have other catastrophic experiences in the Middle East that show that the United States cannot change regimes by just bombing or using coercive means. United States, 20 years, United States and its allies, 20 years in Afghanistan, spent over $1,000 billion, thousands of American soldiers killed, tens of thousands of innocent Afghani people killed. At the end, they have replaced Taliban with Taliban. And they had to leave the country so badly. So this is not possible. My argument is that United States strategy in dealing with Iran is to weaken Iran and not to change the regime.
شكرا لك. اسمح لي أن أختم على
Thank you so much. We conclude with Mr. Khalid. Quickly, some countries have been engaged in new balance of power. India, for example, and in the Arab region. Those alliances, how are they reflected on the Gulf countries? Briefly, please. They are reflected to a large extent on what's happening. There is a problem of vacuum. The last 10 years, maybe, the decision was taken. The United States to abandon and leave the Middle East and to focus on China. The resources, defense, polls, the psyche, the institutions, the accordance between Republicans and Democrats, but the problems always have been letting them remain in the region. Maybe in the last few years, there was an alliance to happen where the United States will go for Asia. Now there is normalization, and it was invested in politically and in terms of the media, and the deterioration that has happened after the 7th of October and the exposure of the narrative to a large extent, even now going back to reformulate the narrative. And the idea itself faces difficulty. That's why the Board of Peace has come about to replace all that. So all these are attempts to fill the gap and the vacuum in the region. But I'm convinced, once again, that we should focus on the American Godfather. There are 2 points of view. The United States, in terms of managing the chaos that the Middle East has no solution at all. And we have seen Barack, the US ambassador to Syria, and what he said. So we therefore cannot deal with the region except through managing the chaos and with the divisions. But the other opinion that started now with the Trump team, mainly Witkoff and Kushner, their position regarding the unity now has become more dominant. We've seen it in Sudan specifically. There is a push now for Sudan to be united and unified against a point of view that was seeking to divide the country into 2. In Yemen, the position also was clear. In Syria, it is evident. Barack now, he even has changed his latest convictions of late regarding Syria to a large extent. So, as if he is an ambassador So the narrative now is being different. As Arabs and Gulf countries, we should invest in the unity narrative. This will help us to a large extent in terms of the stability in the region. The problem remains in Iran. Changing the regime has been discussed widely, and there are challenges because if there is a fall of the regime, then that means there will be problems in Iran. Maybe that's why there isn't an intervention. But changing the behavior now of the Iran is what the U.S. is working on currently, that there will be convictions more in terms of Iran to get engaged in dialogue in order to reach readdressing of the nuclear issue and the missiles and the allies that have been facing retreat lately. So questions remain, and not every question has a logical answer and realistic one. I thank the speakers, Mr. Khalid Al-Jaber, Mr. Alam Saleh, Mr. Marwan Qablan, Mr. Saljuk Aiden. Thank you all so much. And we also thank the audience, and we call you now for a break. Lunch break. Excuse us, we won't have time for audience Q&A. Thank you.